Hi everyone, my name is Suzanne Nguyen. I share a message of be better, not bitter after the loss of my arm at the age of 22. There was one night where my friends and I decided to go out for a night to have some fun, right? And on the way home, I was the driver behind the wheel and it was dark and it was drizzling. And the car to the right of me veered into my lane. And not being a professional driver at that age, I reacted and I lost control of the wheel. And the next thing you know, the car started flipping over and over and over. The last thing I remembered was being ejected from the windshield. I landed about 50 feet away from the vehicle. I was laying on the wet ground with this bright light above me, and I could hear people screaming and yelling and my friends running up and screaming, "Oh my God, Suzanne, are you okay?" And I wanted to answer. I wanted to signal with my eyeballs, but I couldn't. That was supposed to be my most painful moment in life, but I couldn't feel a thing. I was completely numb. So arriving to the hospital, doctors told me I was actually very fortunate. And I was flabbergasted. Why? Me? Lucky? Like, I don't understand. The doctors told me if the ambulance had not arrived when they did, I would have been in a vegetative state due to shock. Yeah, 60 seconds later, I wouldn't be here. So after many months of being in the ICU, intensive care unit, I remember my mom and dad coming to the hospital and seeing me on the hospital bed. They were at a loss for words. My dad, which normally has a lot to say, couldn't come up with anything. My mom was crying like a little baby, and I said, "It's okay, I just lost an arm," right? I didn't know what to say, but seeing them that way, I wanted to say something to make them feel a little better. I don't know. Being in the intensive care unit for several months after being released, being rolled out on a wheelchair, I still remember that moment vividly. I felt the wind in my hair, the sun on my face, and I was extremely grateful just to be alive. Coming home from the hospital, that was a completely different ball game. Every single basic daily task was now an uphill battle. I went through major depression returning home. I remember my turning point. I was building up all of these emotions. I wasn't able to talk about how I was feeling because I didn't want people to feel sorry for me, right? I was isolating myself, didn't want to speak to anyone, and I became very lonely, frustrated, angry, and bitter. So there was one incident that was completely my turning point. I decided to get out of the house one night. There was an altercation. One thing led to another, and my anger got the best of me. The next thing you know, I was behind bars. I'm thinking, first I lose a limb, now potentially I'm losing my freedom. I remember being at home after getting out on bond. I was at home lying in bed, and I've been crying for over 24 hours. I was in the verge of having like a panic attack. I was at my lowest point of my entire life. I remember the sun rising and the sun peeking through the blinds, and I'm still up crying. I've been crying for so long, and that was the moment that I knew I needed to be better instead of being bitter. Because all of those emotions, all of the anger and resentments and bitterness and frustration, all of that was building inside of me, and I was becoming someone I no longer recognized visually and also emotionally. I knew that I needed to be better instead of being bitter. I didn't know how I was going to do it, but I knew that was something that I needed to do because I was on this path of destruction. I was drinking and self-medicating and doing all these things so I could numb the pain. First, I decided to slowly start talking about my feelings to those I trust around me. And the more I spoke about it, the easier it became. So I started becoming more vulnerable. I started reading more self-help books. I started doing the little things that made me happy before, right? Whether it was going to grab lunch with a friend, whether it was going with a friend or some family to the beach and listening to the sound of the ocean. It's so silly, but when I was able to open a water bottle on my own, that was like a small victory for me, right? When I was being able to do things on my own that I didn't need to ask for assistance, I would get really happy. And I realized that all of our happiness looks completely different, mine different than everyone's out there perhaps, but really creating that joy from within and truly loving myself. So two good friends and I, we were hanging out at home and we got kind of bored. So we wanted to go do something fun, right? We were excited. We were young. It was the weekend and we just wanted to get out of the house, right? We've been stuck in the house all day. So we decided to go out and have a little fun. We jumped in the car and we decided to go to downtown area, hopefully meeting up some friends, being able to have a good Saturday night. So I was with two friends that day, Mikey and Noemi, and we've been friends for a very long time. Very good friends, very supportive friends, and two people that I really enjoyed hanging out with often. When we were together, we'd have a ton of fun. We really would. We would hang out, do nothing, have fun, go out and do nothing and have a ton of fun. But we were together, we would laugh, we would talk about anything and everything. We would make memories. So on the way home, I was the driver behind the wheel. And of course, we all like to listen to music, right? So I turned the radio up. We're all just having a great time. We're driving home, but the weather is not great. It's dark and drizzling. And I was once again the driver behind the wheel, and a car had veered next to me, and a car had veered towards me, and I completely lost control, and the car started rolling over and over. I do remember when the car veered on my lane, I got so nervous. I didn't know what to do. And I looked back real quick just to check on my friends. And that was the last thing that I remember. I do recall clearly the conversation that the doctors and I had arriving at the hospital. The doctors looked at me and said, "You are so fortunate. You're so very lucky." And I was flabbergasted to hear what he was saying. I didn't believe it, obviously. My dad wanted to make sure the doctors were running different tests to make sure there wasn't any other damages, right? The doctors, of course, that was what they were planning to do as well. But my mom and dad was just really concerned, obviously, my parents. So I remember being in this tiny area. I had to go through a CAT scan, an MRI scan, and I remember my body was just already so weak from what has happened, right? Being ejected from the windshield about 50 feet from the vehicle. And I was just bruised up. I had bruises all over my face. I had this huge scratch on my face, and going through the MRI and doing the CAT scan, doing different blood tests, blood work. I mean, I felt like I was a lab rat being poked all different directions, different areas, right? But they needed to run a ton of different testing to find out if there was anything else, internal bleeding, any head trauma. And it's so interesting because I still think of that car accident like it was yesterday. I mean, it's been over 2 decades, but literally it feels like it happened the other day. So the stories and the moments that I experienced on January 13, 2001, some moments are like so clear to me, while other moments are so blurry. But I do remember that waking up doctors telling me that they weren't able to save my arm because it was completely severed from a piece of the car that landed on my arm. So waking up being an amputee, yeah, waking up and looking down and realizing that piece of me was completely gone, forever gone. I remember the love and support that I had during that time. I was very, very fortunate. The love and support I had then until now. Of course, my family, they were there for me. My mom, my dad, my sisters. My sister Teresa, she was very broken about what happened. And she actually resigned from her job so she could stay with me every second of every minute of the day. So one of my girlfriends and I were having this conversation not too long ago about me being in the hospital. And she was telling me that she tried to visit me at the hospital and I wasn't accepting any visitors at all. She remembered trying to visit me and I was just screaming so loud at the top of my lungs. And she reminded me how hard it was for her to hear that. She told me the screams and the crying that she heard from my room were just so hard for her. And my family told her and a few people that she came with, my friends, that I was not just ready or wanting to see anyone. So there were a couple people that came that weren't able to visit me. I just wasn't in the state of mind. I was humiliated. I felt like a monster. I felt like I looked like a monster. And emotionally, I wasn't in a good place. So I didn't want to see anyone. I was just in a place where I was hiding out. I was so embarrassed and so humiliated about what happened. And now I'm an amputee, and just being at that young age, I didn't know how to process it, didn't know how to feel. So, yeah, I was in the intensive care unit for 2 to 3 months, if I'm not mistaken. And I remember I have this scar right here. This was like open right here. This area was just in a really bad situation, I guess. They had to take the skin from my right thigh and then apply it here. A skin graft, right? So this area is actually the skin from my thigh that they had to put on this area. After coming home from the hospital, having that physical pain, there was also emotional pain, right? And that, I feel like, that is like the combination for disaster, right? Physical pain, emotional pain, that's just full-on pain. I remember coming home and having these frequent visits with the doctor, and they mentioned I needed therapy, I needed rehab. I was recommended to shop for a prosthetic, right? That was really devastating. I was thinking to myself, like, girls my age are shopping for like purses or a dress or shoes, and here I am shopping for an arm, which just made me extremely depressed. Coming home from the hospital, I needed assistance on cleaning the wound and dressing it, right? And bandaging it up. So my mom was by my side at home doing that. She was in the medical field. So luckily she knew what she was doing. But I still remember how painful it was because it was like raw flesh, right? And new skin that was on top of this amputated arm. So physically, I was just in the worst pain I'd ever imagined possible. I needed assistance on getting dressed. I needed assistance on showering. I needed assistance on washing my hair. I mean, I needed help because I had no idea on how to do things with one hand. I needed to learn how to do everything with my left hand because before I was right-handed as well. So I needed to learn how to do everything. I needed to learn how to use chopsticks again, right? I needed to learn how to use a fork and use a spoon, brush my hair, putting on makeup, combing my hair, learning how to be better and not bitter, learning how to be better and moving forward with the situation, with the current situation was very difficult. I started with being vulnerable, talking about my emotions. I was reading self-help books, The Art of Happiness by Dalai Lama. I was watching things that were more inspiring, right? Instead of watching the drama or the negativity on TV, I would watch inspirational shows, something that would bring a smile to my face. But most importantly, one thing that was keeping me from moving forward, which I needed to do first and foremost, was accepting my reality. That was really hard to do, right? Because I was in the corner, in the dark, looking at photos of me with 2 arms, looking at how things used to be. And when we're in that past mindset, we're like holding on to something that may no longer be there. And for me, I was living in the past. I was thinking, well, what if this and what if that? And just not ready to accept that I was an amputee. And of course, we are all on our own journey, but accepting reality, accepting the situation as it is, that's really important. And that, I'm telling you, is something that held up my recovery for multiple years, because I was living the past. I was self-medicating. I was drinking. I was doing all of these things because I was living in the past. I wasn't ready to move forward. I wasn't ready to accept my new identity. I wasn't ready to accept the fact that I was a 22-year-old amputee. My advice for others that are going through, that have experienced some type of trauma, some type of pain, is to lean on those around you and talk about your feelings. Speak about it. It doesn't make you look weak. Actually, vulnerability is courageous. It's the biggest strength that one can have, is to talk about their feelings. When we're not talking about it, when we're not writing about it, journaling it, we're keeping it inside, we're suppressing it. And one day when something happens out of the blue, when you least expect it, you're going to explode, right? And our feelings are just out of whack, and the worst thing could happen. As for me, having my anger completely take over. So fast forward to now, I am very grateful that I am living my best life, full of gratitude for all the experiences that I had and all the lows that actually got me to where I'm at now. So I am an international published author of One Arm But Not an Arms. I am a professional speaker, 2-time TEDx speaker. I was featured as Yahoo's most influential a few years ago. Chicago featured me as most valuable person on the planet. And a couple of years ago, I was crowned first queen of Mrs. Universal Empire. It's an international beauty pageant held in London that celebrates diversity, resilience, woman empowerment. And I represented the USA, and I came back with the crown and the title first queen of Mrs. Universal Empire. Right now, I am completely focused on my coaching practice, helping others move forward and to be better instead of being bitter. I am passionate about sharing my message as well as a speaker, and continuously studying positive psychology and just trying to put my best foot forward and remind others that we can bounce back from adversity. It's not easy, but resilience is in our DNA.